Hello, everyone. I'm Daniel Rubenstein. It's February 3rd, 2025, and this is the live daily briefing of the Israeli Citizen Spokesperson's Office. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is currently in Washington, where he will be having a very important meeting with President Trump. The topics that they will discuss are the future of Israel's war against Hamas, the future of Gaza, the fate of the hostages that Hamas has been holding for 486 days now, and a vision for a different Middle East. The United States and Israel have a shared goal. Hamas cannot be the government of Gaza. On October 7th, 2023, Hamas was the government of Gaza. It still is the government of Gaza. For the sake of peace, Hamas cannot be allowed to remain the government of Gaza. Gaza needs a new government that will make peace with Israel, not war with Israel. Hamas and UNRWA are educating the next generation of Gazans to pursue a forever war against Israel. Palestinian children in Gaza deserve to aspire to something other than martyrdom. If Hamas is in power, the children of Gaza will be taught that the best thing that they can do with their lives is to die fighting Israel. If Hamas is in power, peace and coexistence are impossible. Gaza cannot be rebuilt and should not be rebuilt if its government is promising more war that will lead to more destruction. It's common sense. I just wish I heard it from more world leaders. Don't you? Nearly 16 months after the October 7th massacre, Hamas is still holding 79 hostages. Hamas is starving the hostages, torturing the hostages, holding hostages in cages, and using hostages as slaves. Hamas is holding the bodies of dead hostages. Israel has agreed to pay a high ransom in order to bring these hostages home. We need as much pressure as possible on Hamas and on the countries that support Hamas the most: Qatar, Turkey, Iran, and South Africa, until Hamas can never threaten the people of Israel again. How can life improve for the people of Gaza? President Trump has asked Egypt to open their borders and welcome Palestinians in Gaza who lost their homes as a result of the war that the Hamas government waged against its neighbor Israel. Egypt and Jordan have said no. They don't want Hamas supporters on their territory. Other people are suggesting that Qatar provide housing in Doha for Palestinians who need a place to live. I think that Palestinians in Gaza should stay in Gaza and live in peace with Israel. Make peace. End all claims against Israel. Wars should end with peace. The problem is that most of the people of Gaza are demanding the right to move to what's now Israel. How do I know this? Well, I just went to the UNRWA website. It says that UNRWA has registered 1.58 million people in Gaza as refugees. This is not the number of internally displaced people from the current war. This is the number of refugees from 1948 and their descendants. 1.58 million people in Gaza believe that their true home is not Gaza. They believe that Gaza is their temporary home until they are able to liberate Palestine. There are around 2 million people in Gaza. This means that most of the people of Gaza believe that their real home is in what's now Israel. It is precisely for this reason that the October 7th massacre was exciting for the people of Gaza. The Hamas invasion of October 7th was the liberation of Palestine in practice. If the Palestinian people believed that the true home of Palestinians who live in Gaza is Gaza, that would be great. Gaza could become a prosperous state, living in peace with Israel. But that's not what Palestinians believe. Palestinians believe that the people in Gaza have the right to invade Israel. It's this idea that needs to die if everyone is going to have a better future. Let's take some questions from people watching live on our social media platforms, from Instagram, YouTube, X, maybe even LinkedIn, please.
Thank you, Daniel. Our first question comes from Instagram. Can you please give us an update on the IDF Jenin operation?
Yes, Jenin is a Palestinian city in the northern West Bank in Samaria. Jenin is supposed to be governed by the Palestinian Authority, which is the Palestinian government that cooperates with Israel. But the Palestinian Authority government has failed to effectively govern its own cities. And what has happened in Jenin is that it has become filled with terrorists who are claiming the same right to destroy Israel that the terrorists in Gaza are claiming. It's the same ideas, the same kind of people in Jenin who want to destroy Israel. And they want to spread their violence, not just in Jenin, they want it to spread all throughout the West Bank and open up another front against the people of Israel. And the Israeli military and government is saying we are not going to sit and watch as people who live in the hills above our homes are acquiring the means to carry out an October 7th style massacre. We're going to take action against them, and that is what you're seeing. You are seeing Israel take steps to remove terrorists from areas where they are plotting attacks against Israel. It's as simple as that.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Benji on Instagram. Why is Qatar being trusted to negotiate the deal despite being a major supporter of the Hamas terror organization?
Qatar has leverage over us. Qatar is in a position to demand that it be a mediator in the hostage ransom arrangement that we are seeing play out. On October the 7th, 2023, Hamas leaders were in Qatar. It was Qatar that was hosting Hamas leaders. And Qatar had also had a long history of providing money to Gaza with Israel's blessing, with the idea that Gaza should not fall into some type of humanitarian catastrophe and that there should be some type of bare standard of living, even though Hamas was the government of Gaza. And we have since learned that with Hamas as the government of Gaza, there was a lot of wealth and prosperity in some areas of Gaza, and that Hamas was taking all the wealth for itself and using it to build its military capabilities against Israel. In the meantime, Qatar remains the middleman, you could say, between the Hamas leaders who are living in Doha, in Qatar, and the Israeli negotiators. I hope we will reach a point in the future where we do not rely on Qatar, because it's very clear that Qatar is on the side of Hamas. It's very clear that Qatar told Hamas to keep the hostages that it took on October 7th until Hamas gets a deal that allows Hamas to remain in power in Gaza. So the fact that Hamas has agreed to a deal with Qatari mediation should raise some concerns about what kind of deal we're actually agreeing to and what we're getting. And that's precisely what the Israeli Prime Minister and the US President are going to be discussing, is how does this hostage ransom arrangement play out? We're in phase 1 right now. We have to see what's going to happen in phase 2, and I hope we're going to have some type of vision and pressure that Hamas cannot remain the government of Gaza and Qatar will be out of the picture.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Sarah on YouTube. For some reason, it seems that Hamas doesn't know where Shiri, Ariel, and Kafir are, or their condition. Why is Israel not putting pressure on them as they did with Arbel Yehud?
At this point, we have very limited information about the true fate of Shiri Bibas and her 2 children, Kfir and Ariel. They are on the list of the 33 Israelis who are supposed to be released in phase 1 of the hostage ransom deal. Hamas claimed a year ago that the Bibas mother and children were killed. Hamas has not provided evidence that this is the case. It is not clear the circumstances in which the Bibas family was held in Gaza. We're simply going to have to wait and see. As far as the leverage that we're able to apply, the deal is the deal as written. Hamas is supposed to provide the live hostages first. The fact that the Bibas family was not provided at an earlier phase, and we have already moved on to some of the male civilians, is an indication that the worst may have happened. But we cannot be sure. We do not know that Hamas may be holding them as additional leverage. It's just impossible to know at this point. We're going to have to wait and see how the deal plays out each week.
Thank you. Cindy on Instagram asks, can you please give an update on UNRWA leaving Israel? And can you share how UNRWA has failed and what other agencies are doing?
Yeah, so 3 months ago, the Israeli parliament passed legislation saying that UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, saying that Israeli officials were banned from cooperating with UNRWA and that effectively UNRWA could not operate from areas under the control of the state of Israel. It remains to be seen exactly how this legislation is going to be implemented, but it is the law, for example, that if an UNRWA official in Israel picks up the phone and calls the Israeli Foreign Ministry, that the Israeli Foreign Ministry official is not supposed to cooperate with them. UNRWA is supposed to leave Jerusalem. It's the capital of Israel. It remains to be seen how this is going to play out. But it's a positive step toward what I hope will be the eventual dismantlement of UNRWA. UNRWA is an organization that has been infiltrated by Hamas, compromised by Hamas. In Gaza, many of the people who work for UNRWA are either Hamas guys themselves or they have family members who are in Hamas. So the cooperation is quite tight. You may recall that in Gaza City, underneath UNRWA headquarters, Hamas built a massive military base in a big tunnel where they had a server farm that was taking electricity from UNRWA headquarters above. UNRWA officials still have not said if they are upset by this, if they looked at the electricity bill and had any questions. It's very clear that UNRWA is the wrong address for delivering any kind of aid to Gaza. UNRWA should be dismantled and it should be replaced with Palestinian responsibility. Palestinians should take responsibility for their own communities, tax their population. That money can be used for schools and health facilities, just like it is in every government everywhere in the world. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the ones most overlooked. You can see how many people are fighting to maintain the current system because they're quite sympathetic with UNRWA's vision, which is the same vision as Hamas, that there be no more Israel. So we need to do everything we can to get UNRWA out of the picture, and it will take some time until the new law takes effect and everyone can really see the consequences for what they are.
Thank you. Our next question comes from YouTube. Why are the moderate countries in the Arab world seemingly so reluctant to speak out in favor of Israel against Hamas?
The leaders of every country in the region worry first and foremost about their own population and the opinions of their own population about what their government is doing. It doesn't matter if you're a dictatorship, authoritarian, democracy. Leaders do worry about the opinions of their own population. And for the past year plus, the Qatari international television network, Al Jazeera, just to cite one example, has been broadcasting propaganda into the minds of many Muslim countries around the Middle East, saying that Israel is evil, genocidal, and all of these things. That makes it very difficult for a leader to come out and say, no, that this is not the case. This leader will be accused of selling out the Palestinian cause, and so on. We should take some hope that the Abraham Accords, which were signed in 2020 with the UAE, Bahrain, and others, these accords are still in effect. The UAE still maintains strong relations with Israel. Bahrain maintains strong relations with Israel. But it's a difficult political environment for leaders of these countries to come out in favor or even against Hamas when, for example, the Palestinian Authority, the PLO, the organization that Israel cooperates with, the PLO doesn't condemn Hamas. It doesn't say that the October 7th massacre was immoral. It thinks that the people who sent suicide bombers to blow themselves up against civilians are heroes who should be released from prison. So it's hard to step out of line from the mainstream Palestinian position, or even France, for example, which has been one of the most hostile countries toward Israel for a long time and continues to be. I would be surprised to see a country like the UAE take a more pro-Israel stance publicly than France. We're in a difficult political environment, but again, that's what is being discussed right now in Washington is the future of the Middle East. Who's going to take responsibility for Gaza? Who's going to join the Abraham Accords? Or will we be down more of the same path? That's another option too that I hope is not taken.
Thank you. This is our final question. Audra on Instagram asks, how can we re-educate 3 generations with this radical ideology?
I don't have an answer about even how to educate all of the people of Israel in the way that I think they should be educated. So it's very hard for me to say how another people should be educated. But it's very clear that we should set some guidelines. And the guideline is that if Hamas is the government of Gaza, that Gaza should expect very little from the international community. There should be conditions about food and supplies that are sent into Gaza if these food and supplies are going to be taken at the border, taxed by Hamas, distributed by Hamas. If all of the conditions in Gaza are going to go back to as they were on October 6, 2023, then that would be a non-starter. Ultimately, it's up to Palestinians to take responsibility for the way they want to educate their children, and it's up to us to react accordingly to how they choose to do so. I want to thank you all for all of the questions that you've asked. This was a great live, all the questions I got from Instagram, YouTube, X. You can follow me on all these platforms. We'll be back here tomorrow live at 3 p.m. Israel time, 8 a.m. Eastern. I'm Daniel Rubenstein. Have a lovely day.